The message traveled across the stars for 3 days before anyone heard it. It was a simple cry for help, sent from a dying world to anyone who would listen. Elder Morvith stood at the window of his council chamber and watched his people suffer. The streets of the capital city were empty now. The markets that once rang with voices and laughter had fallen silent. The plague had come without warning, and it was killing the Volari faster than their doctors could count the dead. The Volari were not warriors. They had never been warriors. For 10,000 years, they had lived in peace. They built hospitals instead of warships. They trained doctors instead of soldiers. When other species fought their bloody wars across the galaxy, the Volari offered medicine and shelter to the wounded of both sides. Now they needed help. And Morvith had sent his message to the Galactic Coalition. He asked for medical ships. He asked for doctors and medicine. He asked for the same kindness his people had shown to others for so long. He did not expect what came next. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space that many species still considered wild and dangerous, a human officer sat in his command chair and listened to the Volari distress call. Captain Daniel Cruz was a tall man with tired eyes and gray at his temples. He had served in the United Earth Space Command for 22 years, and he had seen enough of the galaxy to know when something was wrong. "Play it again," he said to his communications officer. The message filled the bridge once more. The voice of Elder Morvith was calm, but Cruz could hear the fear beneath the words. The Volari leader spoke of a plague that killed within days. He spoke of hospitals overflowing with the sick and the dying. He begged for anyone to send aid. Cruz turned to his tactical officer, a young woman named Megan Torres. "What do we know about this plague?" Torres pulled up the data on her screen. "Not much, sir. It appeared 3 weeks ago on Ashara Prime. No known cause. No cure. It only affects the Volari. Other species on the planet are completely immune." Cruz felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. A plague that appeared from nowhere. A plague that only killed one species. A plague that left everyone else untouched. He had seen this before. "Get me Admiral Monroe," he said. "Priority channel, now." Admiral Lisa Monroe was not an easy woman to reach. She commanded all human military forces in the outer sectors, and her time was precious. But when she heard what Cruz had to say, she gave him her full attention. "You think it is the Keth," she said. It was not a question. "I do," Cruz replied. "The pattern matches their biological weapons program. They test on neutral worlds first. Worlds with no military. Worlds that cannot fight back." Monroe was silent for a long moment. On her end of the transmission, Cruz could hear the soft hum of a warship's engines. The Admiral was already in space, already moving towards something. "We intercepted Keth communications 6 hours ago," Monroe finally said. "They are sending a fleet to Ashara Prime, 42 warships. They expect to find a world too weak to resist." Cruz closed his eyes. The Volari had asked for doctors. They were about to receive an invasion instead. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Monroe's voice was hard as steel. "The Volari asked the galaxy for help. We are going to answer. I am sending Commander Nathan Cole with the 3rd Fleet, 27 ships. You will join them. The Coalition will not like this," Cruz said. "The Volari have not asked for military aid. They have asked for medical support. Then we will bring both," Monroe replied. "But the medicine will not matter if everyone is dead. Get your ship moving, Captain. You have 3 days." Cruz ended the transmission and turned to his crew. They were watching him, waiting for orders. These were good people. Brave people. They had families waiting for them back on Earth. They had lives they wanted to return to, and he was about to ask them to fight for a world they had never seen, for people they had never met. "Set course for Ashara Prime," he said. Maximum speed. No one questioned him. No one hesitated. The ship hummed with power as the engines came to life, and the stars outside the window stretched into lines of light as they jumped into hyperspace. 3 days later, the Third Fleet emerged above Ashara Prime. 27 human warships hung in the darkness of space, their weapons ready, their crews at battle stations. Below them, the Valari world turned slowly, its cities glowing softly in the night. On the surface, Elder Morvith received word of the fleet's arrival. He rushed to the communication center, hoping to greet the doctors and medical ships he had been promised. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. These were not medical ships. These were warships. Human warships. Their hulls were thick with armor. Their sides bristled with weapons. They looked like predators waiting to strike. What is the meaning of this? Morvith demanded. We asked for aid. We asked for medicine. Why have you sent weapons of war to our world? Captain Cruz's face appeared on the screen. His expression was calm, but his eyes were serious. Elder Morvith, he said, my name is Captain Daniel Cruz of the United Earth Space Command. We received your distress call. We are here to help. Help? Morvith's voice shook with confusion and anger. We asked for doctors. You have brought destroyers. We asked for medicine. You have brought missiles. This is not help. This is an occupation. Cruz shook his head slowly. No, Elder, this is protection. The plague that is killing your people was not an accident. It was created. It was a weapon. And the ones who made it are coming to finish what they started. Morvith stared at the human captain. He wanted to believe this was a lie. He wanted to believe that his people were simply sick, that no one would be cruel enough to murder an entire species with disease. But deep in his heart, he felt the terrible truth of Cruz's words. Who? He whispered. Who would do this? The Keth Dominion, Cruz replied. Their fleet will arrive within days. They expect to find a world too weak to resist. They expect to walk in and take everything your people have built. Cruz leaned forward, and his voice grew firm. They will not find what they expect. They will find us. Morvith looked at the human warships filling his sky. He looked at the face of the captain who had come from across the galaxy to stand between his people and destruction. He did not understand humans. He did not know why they had come. He did not know what they wanted in return. But for the first time in weeks, Elder Morvith felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope. The human shuttle descended through the clouds of Ashara Prime and landed in the central plaza of the capital city. Elder Morvith stood waiting with his council, surrounded by guards who carried weapons they had never used. The Valari watched with wide eyes as the shuttle doors opened and the humans stepped out. Captain Daniel Cruz came first. He wore a simple gray uniform and carried no visible weapons. Behind him came a woman with kind eyes and medical equipment hanging from her belt. This was Dr. Amy Sullivan, the chief medical officer. Last came a tall soldier with a hard face and alert eyes. Lieutenant Kevin Drake moved like a predator, always watching, always ready. Morvith stepped forward to meet them. His long robes swept the ground, and his silver hair caught the light of the twin suns. He was old by Valari standards, nearly 200 years, and he had led his people through many difficulties. But nothing had prepared him for this. Captain Cruz, he said, keeping his voice steady, I must ask you again. Why have you brought warships to our world? The Galactic Coalition will not approve of this. We have treaties. We have laws. Cruz nodded respectfully. I understand your concern, Elder, but I must ask you to listen to what we have learned. May we speak somewhere private? Morvith hesitated. His advisors whispered warnings to him. They did not trust these humans. They had heard stories about the violent species from the distant arm of the galaxy. Humans were known for their wars, their aggression, their refusal to back down from any fight. But Morvith was wise enough to know that refusing to listen was the act of a fool. "Follow me," he said. They walked through empty streets to the council chamber. Along the way, Cruz saw the damage the plague had done. Hospitals were overflowing. Medical tents filled the parks and open spaces. The sick lay in rows, attended by exhausted doctors who had not slept in days. Dr. Sullivan stopped beside one of the medical tents. "May I examine some of your patients?" she asked one of the local doctors. "I might be able to help." The Valari doctor looked at her with tired eyes. He did not trust her, but he was too exhausted to argue. He nodded and led her inside. Cruz and Drake continued with Morvith to the council chamber. Inside, the other members of the Valari High Council waited. They looked at the humans with suspicion and fear. "Speak," Morvith said as he took his seat. "Tell us why you believe this plague was created." Cruz stood before them and told them everything. He explained how human intelligence had been watching the Keth Dominion for years. He described their biological weapons program. He showed them intercepted communications that spoke of testing on soft targets before major military operations. "The Keth do not conquer through open war alone," Cruz said. "They weaken their targets first. They use disease to kill the strong and break the spirit of the survivors. Then their ships arrive and they claim the world as their own." One of the council members, a younger Valari with bright orange eyes, shook his head. "This is impossible. We have traded with the Keth for 300 years. They have never shown us hostility." "They were waiting," Cruz replied. "Your world has resources they want. Your medical technology is valuable. But you are also beloved by the Coalition. If they attacked you openly, other species might unite against them. So they created a plague that looks natural. They will arrive as rescuers, offering aid to the survivors. And in their gratitude, your people will welcome them as saviors." The council chamber fell silent. The Valari looked at each other with growing horror. They did not want to believe it. They had spent their whole lives trusting in the goodness of others. The idea that someone would murder millions with disease just to steal their world was too terrible to accept. "You have no proof," another council member said. "Only words and theories." At that moment, Dr. Sullivan's voice came through Cruz's communicator. "Captain, you need to hear this." Cruz touched the device on his wrist. "Go ahead, Doctor." Sullivan's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I have examined the plague. I have analyzed its structure. Captain, this disease was engineered. There are markers in its genetic code that could only have been placed there deliberately. Someone designed this plague specifically to target Valari biology. No other species in the galaxy can catch it. It was built to kill them and only them." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted questions and accusations. Some wept. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had heard. Morvith raised his hand, and slowly the room fell quiet. "How long until the Keth fleet arrives?" he asked Cruz. "Our best estimate is 4 days," Cruz replied. "Maybe 5. And your ships? Can they stop them?" Cruz was silent for a moment. He thought about the 42 Keth warships heading toward this world. He thought about his own 27 vessels waiting in orbit. "We will try," he said. "But I will not lie to you, Elder. The Keth outnumber us. This will not be an easy fight." Morvith studied the human captain. He saw no deception in the man's eyes. He saw no greed, no hunger for power or glory. He saw only determination and a strange, fierce compassion that he did not fully understand. "Why?" Morvith asked. "Why would you do this? Your people will die fighting for us. What do you gain from our survival?" Cruz thought about the question for a long moment. It was a question humans had been asked many times, by many species across many years. Because you asked for help, he finally said. That is enough. Before Morvith could respond, an alarm began to sound throughout the city. Lieutenant Drake checked his communicator, and his face grew dark. Captain, he said, the Keth fleet just jumped into the system. They are 4 days early. Cruz felt his heart sink. They had run out of time. Get to the shuttle, he ordered. We need to get back to the fleet now. As they ran through the streets, Morvith called out to them. Captain Cruz, what should we do? Cruz stopped and looked back at the old Valari leader. Around them, the city was waking to the sound of alarms. People were emerging from their homes, looking up at the sky with fear in their eyes. Tell your people to find shelter, Cruz said. Tell them to stay away from windows. Tell them to hold on and wait. Wait for what? Morvith asked. Cruz climbed into the shuttle and looked back one last time. Wait for us to do what we came here to do. The shuttle rose into the sky and vanished among the clouds. Morvith watched it go, then turned to face his frightened people. He did not know if the humans could win. He did not know if anyone could stop the Keth. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The humans had come across the galaxy to fight for strangers. They had come knowing they might die. They had come because the Valari asked for help, and that was enough reason for them. Whatever happened next, Morvith would never forget that. The Keth fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 42 warships spread across the darkness of space, their weapons powering up. Their crews preparing for what they believed would be an easy conquest. War. Leader Kesseth stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. His reptilian face was covered in ritual scars, each one marking a world he had conquered. Soon, he would add another scar for Ashara Prime. Then his sensors detected the human fleet, and his smile disappeared. What is this? He demanded. Who are these ships? His officers scrambled to identify the vessels. When the answer came, Kesseth felt a cold fury rising in his chest. Humans, the violent primitives from the far edge of the galaxy. They had no business here. They had no treaties with the Valari. They had no reason to interfere. Yet there they were. 27 warships arranged in a defensive formation between the Keth fleet and the planet below. KESSOTH opened a communication channel. Human vessels, you are in Keth territory. Leave now or you will be destroyed. Captain Cruz's face appeared on his screen. The human looked calm, almost relaxed, despite the overwhelming force facing him. This is not Keth territory, Cruz replied. This world belongs to the Valari. They asked for help. We answered. The Valari are weak, Kesseth sneered. They are dying. We are here to save them. You are here to enslave them, Cruz said. We know about the plague. We know you created it. And we are not leaving. Kesseth stared at the human captain. For a moment, he considered offering them a chance to withdraw. The humans were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. They had no chance of winning this fight. A wise enemy would recognize this and retreat. But looking into Cruz's eyes, Kesseth saw no fear. He saw no uncertainty. He saw only a strange, quiet determination that he did not understand. Then you will die, Kesseth said. And he ended the transmission. The battle began. The Keth fired first, launching a wave of missiles toward the human fleet. The darkness of space lit up with trails of fire as the weapons raced toward their targets. The human point defense systems came online, filling the void with a wall of energy that destroyed missile after missile. But some got through. The USS Horizon took 3 direct hits and began venting atmosphere. The USS Ranger lost its main engines and drifted out of formation. Commander Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the fleet command ship and watched his vessels take damage. He was a veteran of a dozen battles, and he had learned long ago to keep his emotions locked away during combat. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, he had a job to do. All ships, return fire, he ordered. Target their lead vessels. Make them pay for every shot. The human fleet unleashed its fury. Energy beams crossed the darkness between the two fleets. Missiles launched in waves. The Keth had numbers, but the humans had training and technology that the Keth had not expected. Lieutenant Commander Megan Torres led her fighter squadron through the chaos of battle. Her small, fast ship twisted between enemy fire as she searched for targets. She found one, a Keth cruiser that was lining up a shot on the USS Defiance. "I have the shot," she said into her communicator. Fox 3. Her missiles slammed into the cruiser's engine section. The enemy ship shuddered, then exploded in a ball of orange flame. But for every Keth ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The humans were fighting well, but they were being pushed back. On the surface of Ashara Prime, Elder Morvith watched the battle through a massive telescope in the council chamber. He could see the flashes of light as ships fired at each other. He could see the explosions when vessels died. He did not know which ships were human and which were Keth, but he could see that the fighting was fierce, and he could guess that many were dying. "They are fighting for us," he said softly. "They do not even know us, and they are dying for us." In orbit, the USS Valor moved to intercept a group of Keth destroyers that were trying to break through to the planet. Captain Chris Kane knew his ship could not stop all of them, but he could stop some. "All power to forward shields," he ordered. "Ram the lead destroyer if you have to. Nothing gets through." The Valor took hit after hit. Its armor buckled. Its systems failed one by one. But it held the line. The Keth destroyers could not pass. When the Valor finally lost power, it had destroyed 4 enemy ships and damaged 3 more. Its crew abandoned ship in escape pods, falling toward the planet below. Trusting the Valari to save them, Kesseth watched the battle with growing frustration. His fleet was winning, but the cost was far higher than he had expected. These humans fought like demons. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They threw themselves into the fire again and again, trading their lives for time. What were they fighting for? What did they gain from dying for these weak, peaceful Valari? Kesseth could not understand it, and what he could not understand, he began to fear. "Push forward," he ordered. "Destroy them all." Commander Cole received the damage reports with a heavy heart. 7 ships destroyed. 4 more critically damaged. Nearly 1,000 sailors dead or missing. And still the Keth came. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "we cannot hold much longer. We need to fall back." Cole shook his head. "Fall back to where?" "The planet is behind us. If we retreat, the Keth reach the surface. Then what do we do?" Cole looked out at the battle raging before him. He thought about the 1,000,000 Valari on the planet below, still alive because his fleet was buying them time. He thought about his sailors, fighting and dying in the dark. He thought about what it meant to be human. "We hold," he said. "We hold until we cannot hold anymore. And then we hold a little longer." The officers on his bridge looked at each other. They knew what this meant. They knew they might not survive, but they did not argue. They did not question. They turned back to their stations and continued to fight. Below, on Ashara Prime, Elder Morvith felt tears running down his face. He did not understand humans. He did not understand why they would sacrifice so much for strangers. But watching them die for his people, he felt something break inside him. Something old and certain crumbled away. He had always believed that the galaxy was full of goodness. That kindness would always be repaid with kindness. Now, he understood that true kindness expected nothing in return. True kindness was what the humans were showing now, giving everything they had to protect those who could never repay them. The battle raged on. The humans held the line. And somewhere across the stars, more ships were coming. The fight was not over yet. The sky tore open with light, and hope came screaming through. Admiral Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel as her second fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the Keth formation. 18 fresh warships, their weapons fully charged, their crews hungry for battle. All ships fire at will, she ordered. The Keth fleet, caught between two human forces, erupted in chaos. War leader Keseth watched in horror as his rear guard was torn apart by the newcomers. Ships that had been moments from victory now found themselves fighting for survival. Commander Cole felt his heart surge with relief as he saw the second fleet's markers appear on his tactical display. All units, push forward. They're trapped between us. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends. The battle turned in an instant. The Keth, outnumbered now and surrounded, began to falter. Their formation broke as captains tried to find a way to escape the trap. But Keseth was not finished. He had not conquered 12 worlds by giving up when things became difficult. If he could not win in space, he would win on the ground. Launch the dropships, he ordered. All assault troops to the surface. Take the capital. Kill their leaders. Hundreds of Keth dropships fell toward Ashara Prime like burning meteors. The human fleet tried to stop them, but too many slipped through the defensive fire. They crashed into the streets of the capital city, and Keth soldiers poured out, weapons blazing. The Volari had no army. They had city guards who carried ceremonial weapons and had never seen real combat. Against the hardened Keth shock troops, they fell like grass before a storm. Captain Cruz heard the reports coming in from the surface and made his decision immediately. All available Marine units, prepare for combat drop. We're going down there. Lieutenant Kevin Drake was already suiting up when Cruz reached the hangar bay. The big Marine was checking his rifle with calm, practiced movements. Around him, 50 other Marines were doing the same. Lieutenant, Cruz said, Elder Morvith and the Council are trapped in the government building. A large Keth force is moving toward them. You need to get there first. Drake nodded. We'll get it done, sir. The Marine dropship fell through the atmosphere, shaking violently as anti-aircraft fire exploded around it. Drake held on tight and thought about the mission. He had been a soldier for 15 years. He had fought on a dozen worlds against a dozen enemies. But he had never fought for anything that felt as important as this. These Volari had never asked for war. They had spent their lives healing others. They did not deserve what was happening to them. The dropship hit the ground hard, and the doors blew open. Drake was the first one out, his boots hitting the broken street as he scanned for threats. The capital city was burning. Smoke filled the air. Somewhere nearby, he could hear weapons fire and screaming. Move out, he ordered. Stay tight. Watch the rooftops. They ran through the ruined streets toward the government building. Everywhere they looked, they saw destruction. Bodies lay in the gutters. Buildings had collapsed from weapons fire. The Keth were not here to conquer. They were here to destroy. Drake's squad reached the main plaza just as the Keth assault force was surrounding the government building. At least 200 enemy soldiers were setting up positions, preparing to storm the entrance where a handful of Volari guards were making their last stand. 50 against 200, one of Drake's Marines muttered. Great odds. Drake smiled grimly. I've had worse. Set up firing positions. We hit them hard and fast. No mercy. The Marines opened fire from behind the Keth lines. Their weapons were superior. Their training was better, and they had the element of surprise. The first volley cut down 30 Keth soldiers before they even knew what was happening. The battle for the government building became a nightmare of close combat. The Keth outnumbered the Marines 4-1, but the humans refused to fall back. They fought from building to building, room to room, Using every trick they knew to hold the enemy at bay, Drake himself killed 14 Keth soldiers in the first 10 minutes. He moved through the smoke like a ghost, appearing suddenly to strike down enemies before vanishing again. His Marines followed his example, fighting with a fury that shocked the Keth, but numbers told. The Marines began to fall. One by one, they went down, wounded or killed. Drake took a plasma burn across his shoulder that nearly dropped him. He gritted his teeth against the pain and kept fighting. Inside the government building, Elder Morvith and his council huddled in the central chamber. They could hear the fighting outside, getting closer with every passing minute. The Valari guards at the doors looked terrified. They knew they could not stop what was coming. Then the doors exploded inward, and Keth soldiers poured through. Morvith closed his eyes, ready for death. He had lived a long life. He had served his people well. If this was the end, he would face it with dignity. But death did not come. Instead, he heard human voices shouting and the roar of human weapons. He opened his eyes to see Lieutenant Drake standing in the doorway, his rifle blazing, his uniform torn and burned. Behind him, a handful of Marines fought with desperate courage against the Keth force. The fighting was brutal and brief. When it was over, 12 Keth soldiers lay dead in the council chamber. Drake stood over Morvith, bleeding from 3 wounds, swaying on his feet but refusing to fall. "Are you hurt, sir?" Drake asked. Morvith stared at the human soldier in amazement. "You came for us. You came through all of that for us." Drake smiled through the pain. "That's the job, sir." He collapsed a moment later, his strength finally giving out. The surviving Marines rushed to their lieutenant's side, applying medical aid with practiced hands. Outside, the tide was turning. Human reinforcements were landing across the city. The Keth assault force, cut off from their fleet and facing growing resistance, began to break. Some tried to flee. Some surrendered. Some fought to the death dot in orbit. Admiral Monroe's fleet was crushing what remained of the Keth armada. War leader Kesseth, seeing his defeat was complete, tried to escape in his flagship. The USS Guardian cut him off and disabled his engines. Kesseth was captured alive. He would face justice for the plague he had created and the millions he had murdered as the sun set over the capital city. Elder Morvith sat beside Lieutenant Drake in the makeshift hospital that had been set up in the council chamber. The human soldier was stable now, sleeping peacefully while his wounds healed. Morvith watched him breathe and wondered at the strange fate that had brought these humans to his world. They had asked for nothing. They had expected nothing. They had simply come because they heard a cry for help, and they had given everything to answer it. Morvith reached out and gently took the sleeping soldier's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." Outside, the stars were coming out, and human ships still circled in the sky, watching over the world they had saved. The silence was strange after so much noise. For days, the skies of Ashara Prime had been filled with fire and thunder. Now there was only the soft wind and the distant sound of reconstruction crews clearing the rubble. Elder Morvith walked through the capital city and saw his world changed forever. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years were now ruins. Streets that had known only peace were scarred with the marks of battle. Everywhere he looked, he saw damage that would take generations to repair. But his people were alive. The plague was being cured. The Keth were gone. And for all of this, he had the humans to thank. The cost of the battle was enormous. Admiral Monroe's staff had given him the numbers, and each one felt like a knife in his heart. 14 human ships destroyed. Over 2,000 sailors dead. On the ground, nearly 300 Marines had given their lives defending a world they had never seen before. 2,000 lives. 2,000 families back on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. 2,000 futures erased so that the Valari could have a future of their own. Morvith did not know how to carry such a debt. He did not know if it could ever be repaid. The memorial service was held in the great plaza at the center of the capital. It was the same plaza where the fiercest fighting had occurred, where Lieutenant Drake and his Marines had held the line against impossible odds. The scars of battle were still visible on the surrounding buildings, but the plaza itself had been cleared and cleaned. Thousands of Valari gathered to pay their respects. They stood in silence as human honor guards carried the flags of the fallen. They watched as soldiers they had never met were remembered with words of love and grief. Captain Daniel Cruz stood at the front of the gathering with Admiral Lisa Monroe and the other surviving officers. His uniform was clean and pressed, but exhaustion showed in his eyes. He had not slept properly since the battle began. Commander Nathan Cole was not there. He had died on the third day of fighting, when his ship was destroyed covering the retreat of 2 damaged cruisers. His crew had survived because of his sacrifice. He had not. Admiral Monroe stepped forward to address the crowd. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could hear the pain beneath the words. "We came here because we heard a cry for help," she said. "We did not know the Valari. We had no treaties with them. We had nothing to gain from fighting for them. But they needed help, and we answered." She paused and looked out at the sea of Valari faces. Many of them were crying. Many were holding the hands of children who had been saved from the plague. Children who were alive because human doctors had worked day and night to find a cure. 2,000 of our people will never go home, Monroe continued. They will never see their families again. They will never grow old. They gave their futures so that your people could have a future. This is not a debt we ask you to repay. This is a gift we give freely, because it is right. She stepped back, and the Valari orchestra began to play. The music was ancient and beautiful, a song of mourning that the Valari had sung for their dead for 10,000 years. But today, they sang it for humans. After the service, Elder Morvith found Lieutenant Drake standing alone at the edge of the plaza. The Marine was leaning on a crutch, his wounds still healing. His face was solemn as he watched the crowd slowly scatter. "Lieutenant," Morvith said, approaching him carefully, "you should be resting." Drake shook his head. "I wanted to see them. The ones I couldn't save." Morvith understood. He had felt the same way many times, losing patience when he was a young doctor, before he entered politics. The weight of failure never truly went away. "You saved my life," Morvith said. "You saved my entire council. You fought through an army to reach us." "I lost 12 good people getting there," Drake replied. 12 people who trusted me to bring them home." Morvith was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and placed his hand on the Marine's shoulder. "I have lived for almost 200 years, he said. "I have seen many things. I have known many species. But I have never met anyone like your people. You fight for strangers. You die for those who can give you nothing in return. You carry the weight of your sacrifices with honor and with grief." He looked into Drake's eyes and spoke with absolute sincerity. "Your people are not just warriors. You are something much rarer. You are protectors. And my people will never forget what you have done for us." Drake met the old Valari's gaze. For a moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten just a little. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "That means a lot." In the days that followed, the Valari High Council voted unanimously to request a permanent alliance with the United Earth Federation. The motion passed without a single objection. Even those who had protested the human presence before the battle now spoke in favor of the alliance. The Galactic Coalition, which had ordered the humans to withdraw just days before, quietly approved the treaty. They had watched humanity fight and die for a world that had rejected their help. They had seen something they did not fully understand but could not deny. A Reporter from the Coalition News Service approached Admiral Monroe as she was preparing to depart. Her fleet was gathering in orbit, ready for the long journey home. The wounded were loaded onto medical ships. The dead were carried in sealed containers that would take them back to Earth for burial. "Admiral," the reporter said, "the galaxy is asking questions about what happened here. Many species do not understand why humanity sacrificed so much for the Valari. Can you explain it?" Monroe looked at the reporter with tired eyes. She thought about all the words she could use, all the explanations she could give. She thought about history and politics and strategy, but in the end, she chose the simplest answer. "The Valari expected medical aid," she said. "We brought warships instead. Because sometimes the best medicine is making sure the patient lives long enough to heal." She turned and walked toward her shuttle. Behind her, the reporter stared in silence, trying to understand what he had just heard. On the surface of Ashara Prime, Elder Morvith watched the human fleet rise into the sky. The ships caught the light of the twin suns and glittered like stars ascending to the heavens. Children stood beside their parents and pointed at the departing vessels. These were children who had been dying just weeks ago, now healthy and whole because of human medicine. They waved goodbye to the strangers who had saved them. Morvith raised his own hand in farewell. "Goodbye, my friends," he whispered. "May you find peace. May you find joy. And may the galaxy one day understand what you have shown us today." The ships vanished into the darkness of space. The plaza fell quiet, and the Valari, who had never known war, began the long work of healing. They would build a monument in the plaza. They would write songs about the battle. They would tell stories to their children, and their children's children about the day the humans came. They expected medical aid. They received something far more precious, thought they. Received proof that somewhere in the cold darkness of the universe, there were those who would fight for strangers, die for strangers, and ask nothing in return. They received humanity,